You are now listening to the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
Okay, welcome back to another episode of They Live by Film. This time I'm very excited. I have been asking Elijah Drenner of Dekanalog to come on, and we're able to find some time. And Elijah, I'm just super excited that you were able to connect and do this. So thank you for joining today.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So you are one of the co-founders of Dekanalog. And you are also a very active filmmaker. I live in Austin. I know you have some special ties to Austin in terms of actually winning some awards there. We'll get into that in just a second. And you work at Vinegar Syndrome in a capacity, I'm sure, technically, although it says editor, I'm sure you do multiple things for them. And just all around somebody who loves film. So I'm excited for this discussion.
All right, me too. Thanks, man. Can't wait.
Yeah. It was funny because I remember, so I've been in Austin since about 2005, and we'll very quickly get into Dekanalog, but I remember when you start, sorry, one second. What was the name of the documentary?
Well, at South by?
In 2010.
American Grindhouse.
Grindhouse, thank you. All right, sorry.
It's okay. No, I try to forget about it.
Well, it was, yeah. It's funny. It was good. It was fun. So it's funny. Maybe we'll just start in Austin quickly and then jump into Dekanalog. So I've been there since about 2005, and I remember when American Grindhouse started making waves at South by that year. At the time, I didn't necessarily pay attention to the director until later. I realized that it was you. But that was such a love letter and just such a fun documentary. So. That was
Good.
That
pleases me to hear you say that, because it was something that was sort of started out of love, not really direction, and then we kind of figured out what it was eventually. So I wince when I watch it, but I'm also really happy that the enthusiasm for material comes through, the enthusiasm of the people that we talk to comes through,
Yeah.
and it gets laughs, it gets gasps and shocks. So that pleases me to hear you say that. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thinking that there's going to be a trend throughout this conversation today because, that guy Dick Miller came out a few years ago, and there's another one that's just steeped in a love for and celebration of this guy who we've all known in some capacity or seen in some capacity, and is part of our psyche, whether or not we know him by name. And it was just it was another one where I can see that you're bringing your love for this piece of history out, in a very real way.
Sure, and I think we all share that love, and I think Dick's a little bit different, where I think that people are Dick Miller fans, they just don't know it.
Yeah, exactly.
They're like, oh yeah, that guy. They're like, yeah, that guy. Oh yeah, and your love for him grows every time you see him, whether or not you're consciously aware of whatever TV show or movie he's in. I think even the casual viewer knows who he is, and I think that's what maybe separates that from something like American Grindhouse, because you don't stumble into Olga's House of Shame.
Uh-huh.
You stumble across Gremlins or New York, New York, or After Hours or something, or Terminator. Everybody's seen them, they just don't know.
Yeah, and I guess that's a bridge into Dekanalog. But before we go too much deep into that, there's one thing that I feel like I wanted to call out because there's a lot of between Tubi and Shudder and Netflix, and there's a lot of let's call them nostalgia documentaries that are kind of being made right now. And
Sure.
and they're sort of these like talking head documentaries, and they find somebody who used to go to a video store, and they're like, hey, I went to a video store back in the day. And I just want to call out, I was so happy to see the way that you approach this material because it's not that. like this is a movie that could come out in any era. Uh, and I think, I'm hoping that there are more like this that either you're working on or people with a similar mindset are working on, because you go deep, and anybody that watches it comes out with a love and appreciation, and it's not, oh yeah, I remember that, and like a empty kind of good feeling. It's like you learn and celebrate, and it's the way a documentary should be made. So, huge fan.
Well, thank you. And I think, with when you're making a movie, when you're making a documentary about movies, you're sort of preaching to the choir a little bit. It's like you don't have to hard sell most
Uh-huh.
people who are going to watch this stuff. So I think I hear what you're saying about um, anybody who's on camera talking about something, and these armchair experts who
Uh-huh.
sort of ubiquitous. Um, I've had to rely on people like that very often for doing bonus features, but I would rather not have. I'd rather just go to the source, I
Yeah.
guess. It's like, and very often when you're doing like these Blu-ray bonus features for, as long as I've been doing them, you're very often just trying to convince your boss. It's like, no, we have to go to Pablo Ferro, who I was just talking about him earlier today with a friend of mine. It's like, this guy's not going to be around for much longer.
Yeah.
He was co-editor on Thomas Crown Affair. He designed all the crazy, weird split screen, multiple images. It's like once he's gone, and you're
Yeah.
not going to get this. And I mean, it was an okay interview, but still, you know, just getting him out there, getting the record, that's kind of you're constantly fighting against time with a lot of these people. And I think it's extremely important, even if that's taken for granted, I guess, as just content, right? So,
There's something you're saying I want to tap into a little bit later, because I think it ties into one of the reasons I love Dekanalog, and talks into how I think preservation. A lot of people talk about it with the film itself, but how the supplements can kind of actually help with that. So
mhm.
remind me to come back to there. But there's one thing quickly that I wanted to transition into, kind of you as a person, and then you as somebody who's leading. I've always said if I could come back and be 18 again and go to film school and not work in IT and do this on the side to stay sane, I would want to be an editor, because as I got to learn about movie making,
Mhm.
there's something to me that's so compelling and interesting about sitting in a room with three screens or two screens or whatever, and getting all this raw footage and just driving yourself crazy trying to pull out a story from it.
Mhm.
And I'm curious, was this something that you were drawn to, that you knew you were going to do, that you kind of stumbled into? Like, how did you decide, okay, I'm going to become an editor in multiple formats?
That's a good question. I don't totally know, and it may have just happened out of necessity, but I do remember being in film school and just not understanding f-stops and focal lengths. And it's like, you know what? I get a flatbed. You roll the film in here, there you press the button, and
Uh,
like that I can do, that I understand. So I really liked editing in film school, but I was actually learning on film. So when I started, my first job really was a job that I sort of lied my way into, was was before Grindhouse. I was trying to make a documentary about Jack Hill. I was still in film school.
okay.
I was trying to make this documentary. I was flying out to Los Angeles on my own time, shooting interviews with Jack Hill and Sid Haig and Carl Schanzer and Roger Corman. It's like
Amazing.
none of these people are asking me for my diploma. It's like I stopped going to film school eventually because no one. I mean, I felt like I was out there doing what I was doing anyway. I was getting more value out there saying I'm a documentary filmmaker and do it. And saying people were just like, all right, sure, come on over. And in terms of finding the story, this kind of goes in line, I think, with American Grindhouse, and maybe why I kind of wince a little bit. But um, part of that experience trying to make this documentary about Jack Hill is what eventually led to the director's cut DVD that MPI Media put out, because I was able to convince Jack there was an old Laserdisc version, an old videotape version that was a public domain version. He had since gotten the negative back, and I told him, Jack, put the scene that you cut out, or the scene that was cut out from the distributor, put that in there, call it your director's cut, you can copyright it. He said, good idea, Elijah. I said, and then I'll make the bonus features because I've been making this documentary about your life anyway. So that was a story that I knew. All right. So that was an easy story because I talked to everybody before I ever did the job. I knew the story. And I guess to answer your question is you don't always know the story. You're figuring out what that story is in the editing room. I would say 90% of the time, at least in my case, I know the story or I know what the story can be. Okay. You're finding a through line. It's one person who can just talk about everything, and then you just sprinkle in other people along the line. Now this is talking about documentary stuff. Feature is totally different. Feature editing is completely different than I know than doing this sort of stuff. I don't know if all documentaries are made this way. I would say that if anything, they've been more homogenized. When I see a lot of contemporary documentaries now, they feel way more rehearsed and too slick. Yeah. And it's like, I don't need, that talking head doesn't need to be on a slider. I don't need to see them. It's like, I feel like if it's a good story, it can be a lockdown camera for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, whatever, and people aren't going to get bored.
Yeah.
And I think that's what separates content, as you called it, from documentary.
I like that a lot. Yeah, there's a separate conversation I'd love to have with you just for an hour and a half about editing. I'm fascinated by it. But you took this love and love for filmmakers and love for film and teamed up with George Schmaltz and is it Liza Lay?
Lisa Lee.
Lisa Lee. And decided to form a film distribution company, Dekanalog, and have been going on for several years now. Theatrical, obviously home media, which is we're going to talk about today with Vinegar Syndrome, but a pretty strong theatrical arm as well, correct?
Yeah, actually, surprisingly.
Yeah, that's great. And how did you get connected with this motley crew?
Well, I've known George for a very long time. He works at Kino.
Yeah.
And he had gone away, then he came back. He was at Kickstarter for a little while. He was doing stuff for Sundance Select. And I met him because American Grindhouse was put out on DVD by Kino Lorber. So that's how we met. And I will give George credit because the whole idea of this really started with him because as I forget where he was working at, it wasn't at Kino, but he was getting frustrated with really good movies getting passed by. Yeah. He was in charge of finding movies, and they're like, no. It's like he was very frustrated with it. So he knew the sales agents, and he was on his own, just getting these movies. And this was during COVID. And we were talking, and I said, I've always wanted to do that as well. And I think there's room for it. The partner label thing was just in its infancy. It's like, so really George is more of the theatrical side, and I'm really more the home video side of Dekanalog. And that's not to say that he doesn't find things for home video. It's just that's really where it came out of, and it kind of trickles down to home video to me. And some things we have only home video on, Yeah. So I don't know. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Okay,
there's certain labels. I think Yellow Veil, I think, is one that I think about.
Yeah.
Big World is one I think about.
Yep.
There's certain labels that are going to festivals, I think, and really trying to do preservation, if you want to call it that way, for movies that are made now and would otherwise be forgotten without some form of home release. and I feel like Dekanalog to me is up there in that category of just, it's really celebrating. Of course, there's repertory stuff in it as well, which, and we'll talk about some of that as we go along. But I love the fact that you're finding movies that were either in the festival circuit previously, recently, or currently, and finding a home for them. That's very important.
Well, I think so too. It's like, there's so much stuff out there, and it really, I think the average person doesn't really know or care who's putting it out, as long as it's accessible and getting it up on platforms that um, are, the home video side is one thing, but then you've got the SVOD and the TVOD and the theatrical, and they're very different. And I think the
Yeah.
customers are different. We some things, one of our, I think right now our biggest theatrical release has been Art College 1994,
Okay.
which weirdly, when it premiered in Los Angeles, didn't I don't know if anybody went. I mean, I just it kind of came and went, but like partnering with other places to do special screenings and other events, it's really it's impossible to predict where these things are going to land,
Mm.
especially in theatrical. And George really knows more about that than I do. But it, on the flip side of all this, it's also hard to predict what's going to be a seller. I try to for home video, I try to figure out those things, and I'm not always right. In fact, I'm quite frequently very wrong.
Hopefully
um,
on both sides. Hopefully both sides.
Yeah, it's maybe 50-50. I think there's some things it's like, why was like, okay, like the Adam Rifkin Film Festival. It's like, this is my gift to all of you. Why aren't you buying it? It's like, what is wrong with you people? This is like, and I think that it's a weird, strange sell. I get it, but it's like also when they're gone, and maybe that I think FOMO is what is sort of the secret sauce that for a lot of these slip covers and these limited editions, like that's really what it is. Whether or not people end up actually watching these things, I don't know, but I think there wasn't enough FOMO for the Adam Rifkin Film Festival, and that was a lesson that I learned.
Oh, that's interesting. That's too bad to hear. Adam Rifkin is such a sweet person. I
Yeah,
remember the name of the documentary is escaping me. Hopefully, you can help me remember. It's an Arbalos release, and it's about the filmmaker Giuseppe.
yeah, yeah. Just that he makes a movie.
Giuseppe makes a movie. Thank you.
Mhm.
And seeing Adam Rifkin's sort of involvement and take on this whole story, it was it's a beautiful documentary for a lot of
It
reasons.
is. Yes.
Um, Probably my favorite one I've seen in a long time. But it's just you get to see this. There's an opportunity to make fun of Giuseppe, and Adam never goes there.
No, well, he has a history with Giuseppe too, because he was in Detroit Rock City, so he knew
Right.
him. And all that movie is doing is just objectively following the series of events. That's
Yeah,
all it's doing.
yeah,
That's all it needs to do, and it's fantastic. It never passes judgment.
yeah.
It's there. There's a scene in the movie where he actually has to clean feces off of
Yep.
the neighbor. That he's like, it's like this is, it's not like a heartwarming scene, but the heart that Giuseppe has for this, it's like he is literally helping his neighbor who is, I forgive me, I don't remember if it's like, oh, he was handicapped or what, but there was something wrong with him, and that's what he was just going to do. It just had to be done, and that's kind of like, you know, almost the spirit of the movie. It's like you just have to just do it,
Yeah.
and it's just one thing you have to do. But I mean, Giuseppe Makes a Movie is like one of my top five favorite Rifkin movies. I absolutely love it, and I'm just so pleased it's out there in the world. More people should see it if they haven't.
Sam, and using that as a jumping board, if there are still copies of the Rifkin Film Festival left, I mean, I think that would be, what you find in his movies is there's always even if it's not heartwarming, although a lot of his movies are also very heartwarming,
Mm-hmm.
there's a humanity to all of his work. He's
100%, 100%.
yeah,
And that does come across in these short films that that he made with his friends and family. And I think if people liked Giuseppe Likes a movie, the Adam Rifkin Film Festival is like just slotted right in there. It's almost a precursor to what he ended up doing on that movie.
That's cool. Yeah, I hope people get it. I mean, a big part of this is, and this is a delicate line, right? Because the cynic would say I'm helping sell Dekanalog, but I mean, I don't get anything for it. And I want to celebrate what you're doing.
Neither.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like it's a fine line. I really do enjoy the work you're doing, and we'll get into more of this. And I think that's a great example of something that I hope people buy and give it a shot. Not because not for any commercial reasons other than just
Yeah.
it's a really cool collection of films.
Yeah, I thought so too. And it's like, it happened when Adam and I were doing the stuff for Invisible Maniac, and I was talking about his short films. It's like, well, do you still have those? He's like, yeah. It's like, well, I was originally going to try and get him on the Invisible Maniac disc. I
Okay.
was like, no, give them to me. I'll put them out. So,
Uh-huh.
so I mean, it was a lot of endless back and forth trying to just like, there were tape masters, because all the Super 8 stuff, there was no sync sound on the film. They were never made that way. So I had to sync it up to the videotapes. So
Oh wow.
I had tapes but no film, and I had film but no tape. So what you have, there's a lot of like, there's a couple like kind of super cuts of things that just are sort of randos. Well, that was just the stuff that's like, I've got the sound for this. I don't know what this was supposed to be, but and Adam was just like, no, man, just cut it all together. And he was involved and he signed off on everything. But there were there were two supercut pieces, one Super 8, one VHS, that was just very much in the spirit of what I thought he would do.
Okay.
So
That's good. Well, I think that's a nice way to introduce the catalog. So let's go back to the beginning because um, I really want to talk about the first three films you put out, and there's a reason why, and I'll say the reason first, and then we can talk about the movies. But to me, there's a through line for most of the OCN partner labels, and just the way that my brain works, I try to kind of figure out like what is the through line here. Like you could take something like Connie, no matter what kind of crazy movie they find, there's always a sweetness to it,
yeah,
right? And I think the thing I'm very interested to talk to you about, the Dekanalog, is in the first three movies, you have a surrealist dark comedy, you have this really super like futuristic video game adaptation,
yeah,
um, and then a almost mumblecore style like human drama that from one of the greatest, you know, probably greatest living active filmmakers around. I mean, that's always debatable, but just a fantastic filmmaker. And it's from three different countries,
hmm
and the I couldn't necessarily land on a theme, so where that sort of that connects them all. So what I landed on, and I wanted to just test this with you, is it, and this if this is right, then I think it plays well into the rest of your catalog as well. But you're finding movies that have something in maybe your mind or between you and George and Lisa, sort of y'all's mind, that is a story that is compelling, is a story that is, you know, kind of like, I hate to say worth preserving because that's probably reductive, but it's these modern films that are doing something interesting or unique or worth keeping, and this is the platform for them.
Well, you make it sound so intentional. I love that. I think um, I don't know. I don't know how to answer that. I really don't. I think you want to start off strong.
Yeah,
So put out a Quentin Dupieux movie. That's pretty strong.
yeah,
I
yeah.
think it's actually, as a fan of his work, I actually think it's one of the most accessible but still absurd movies that he's made. Um, and and yeah, with Detention, I was so surprised with that movie. Um, but again, that was something, we came out towards the end of the year, and so we wanted to have good titles for the holidays, for Christmas, right?
Uh-huh.
So it's like, you can kind of front load, right? So you front load something. And I think that's really, well, I guess my it may be a little anticlimactic, but that's my best answer is
Oh,
you front load a lot of these things. And I can't say there was any intention other than wanting to see also what we thought would sell, and whether or not we were correct remains to be seen.
that's interesting. So it's almost, as you tell that story, I'm almost thinking of you putting on your like film programming hat or something.
Absolutely, that's exactly what you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're absolutely, you have to, you're announcing yourself, but then you don't want to like shoot it all at once. You kind of want to, you also don't have everything yet. So you kind of want to pace these things out. So um, I think now, in hindsight, I think those were the right decisions to put those out. And I think now as we're finishing off our 2024 year and we're prepping 2025, and even going on into 26, it's like you're thinking about all these things.
That's interesting.
We're figuring it out as it goes along. If it looks intentional, then I'm happy to hear that.
Oh, that's fascinating. I mean, I think, there is a through like if you let's just taking keep an eye out for just a second. Like if we just kind of park on that. Um, I have a bias against movies that are made after the year 2000 that I'm constantly working on because I just live in the 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s, and
Same. I
same.
get it. I get it.
And I think that between you and Dark Star and Altered Innocence, there are three labels that I always tell people about that are finding modern filmmakers that are doing something that you probably wouldn't expect out of a quote unquote like modern film. Like there's something in these movies that's different and is for cynics like me that roll. I'm like, 2019.
Oh
Uh,
God, what good came out of 2019? Oh God, all right, fine. Where's the film grain?
yeah,
Where's the change in quality during this lap dissolve?
exactly. Exactly. What is this pristine print I'm looking at?
Yes.
But
That's
there's a moment in Keep an Eye Out where the detective, well, I mean, the story is essentially about it's sort of this like dark comedy, I guess, right, about this guy who is called in for questioning over a crime and then
right.
accidentally commits a crime while he's in the office and he's trying to hide the crime.
Exactly.
And there's a detective involved because he's doing the questioning, and he's this absurdist, like Monty Python
Yeah.
style detective who
Yeah.
just is crazy. But there's a moment where I think he takes a drag of a cigarette, and the smoke escapes his
Comes out.
chest,
Yes. Yes.
and it's never explained. And I'm like, okay, sold. I'm in. Like the rest of the movie, whatever happens, I'm in.
Yeah, there's a lot of moments in that movie that are kind of like where you're just, for me at least, I was just sold. Mine, really came very late.
Okay.
There's a ridiculous scene where the janitor, I feel like he slips and like impales himself or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's so late in the movie, but it's like it is. I so rarely laugh out loud at
Uh-huh.
home, and
Uh-huh.
that was a moment where whatever this was building to, I never saw coming, and you laugh out loud. I mean, I think that's why. I mean, it's like it's absurd, but I feel like my mom would like this movie.
Yeah. No, it's right. There's nothing in it that's difficult to watch, or yeah, I
Uh,
think accessible is a great word. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's like, yeah, it's got some words at the bottom of the screen. They're not speaking English, but you can still follow it. And I think too, that's a really good sign of a filmmaker. It's a visual language, and
Right.
Quentin really understands that. And to make that gag that I explained come off, you had to see physically what was happening. And there is very often, I think, at least for me, when I'm reading subtitles, I don't necessarily have to read the subtitle to know what's going on. And I actually
Right.
try to actively just watch the screen rather than get caught up in the minutia of the words that are being spoken. And to me, if anything, I think a lot of our international titles fit that bill.
Yeah.
I really value just the experience of seeing something visually. You can turn off the sound, you can watch it in a noisy bar and still follow it.
The test for that I tried. It works very well for keep an eye out. Is to uh, uh, watch the movie with the commentary on.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not first, like watch the movie first, but then go back and
Right.
watch it. And how often I find myself, lo even though, I mean, Quentin does a great job in that commentary, I I often tuned him out because my eyes were drawn in. I wanted to watch the movie again.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
had to go back and be like, wait, I missed like 3 minutes.
Totally. No, totally. You're totally right.
So we talked about something earlier, and this might be the best time to bring it in because the second title was one that Detention was one that, I would say my interest in sort of video game adaptations is low
Same.
generally. Yeah. And so, I was like, okay, let's, keep an eye out was so good. I'm curious. Like, obviously, they have good taste over at Dekanalog. And I watched the movie, and the visuals in that movie are insane. And I couldn't wait to get to the supplements. And there's an interview that's done with the creators of the video game.
Hmm.
And a that's an amazing interview. Like, well, go ahead if yeah.
No, no, no. I'm glad you think that. This was stuff that was made in China, so we did it actually had nothing to do with those. So I found them to be very enlightening as well. So I was just as blown away by it as you were. So
Yeah, like I think the thing that jumps out to me for Detention is why I liked it was because first of all, there's a love for practical effects where possible, which is
yeah,
always going to get me.
yeah.
But it's visually just one of these like arresting movies. Like you kind of can't keep your eye off the screen.
No, I totally agree. It's so easy to follow because it's like it is. I don't know if it's because it's based on a video game or maybe maybe it's that first person thing about playing the video game. I don't know, but like it's a very accessible, easy to watch movie.
Yeah, yeah. Um, and then and I always get his name wrong. Paul Negrescu. Negrescu.
Yeah, I just call him Paul. Paul's movie.
Paul is number three, and I saw a month in Thailand. I have yet to see two lottery tickets, but that's coming up very quickly.
Hmm.
Um, but that was a departure in tone from Detention.
Very much so. Very much, and so is sorry, two lottery tickets. So is two lottery tickets. I mean, those movies are very different in tone. From both ends of the spectrum. Um,
Okay.
it's a comedy, an absurdist comedy, not unlike I would say Keep an Eye Out, but not as um, I don't know, less Monty Python-esque, I would say.
Okay.
But it's it's a funny movie, but there's a lot of heart to it too.
Yeah, that's the thing that struck me is he seems as a filmmaker, and this is true for all of his work anyways, but it's nice seeing the way that he writes characters, I think is very mature and
Mhm.
um, it reminds me a lot of these kind of movies that were coming out in the 90s where you'd have a lot of friends and they'd be going through something or they would be it's like a day in the life of kind of movie or a week in the life of kind of movie with friends and you're getting a glimpse into this reality and I,
Yeah,
I missed I've always liked those kind of films so this was a nice throwback to that.
yeah, I think so too. And he's very adaptable. His latest movie we put out, Men of Deeds, that's going to be coming out on Blu-ray next year at some point. Vastly different in tone.
Okay.
I don't know if you've heard of it or seen it, but it's sort of it's Paul's No Country for Old Men
Wow.
in a lot of ways, and it has a very there is the sort of there is that human touch, but it gets dark and a little violent too. So I his movies are tough to sell, and the two lottery tickets and a month in Thailand. It's like those. I don't think those quite sold as well as we thought. Um, comedies, dramas from, I one thing I think I'm discovering too with international features is, I think people, and I'm speaking generally, I don't want to get criticized for it, but I'm also speaking
Uh-huh.
for myself as well. But like international films with subtitles, if they're white or could pass for white, aren't as, it's not as much. I kind of feel like it's like people won't necessarily gravitate towards that. But if it's Nigerian or Southeast Asian or Hispanic, it's like that's when it's different. I'm talking about,
Oh,
I'm
interesting.
speaking generally, of course,
Interesting.
but in terms of the um, the the market which purchases Blu-rays and DVDs,
Hmm.
I would say without any kind of bias at all, is that it slants white male, right? I mean, let's just be
Oh,
honest.
for sure.
And I think the white male is like I think their interest more is in um, uh, races that aren't white or could pass as white. I'm just speaking generally, of course, but
No, what an interesting
that's
concept.
my perception.
It's almost saying like, okay, I'm gonna go discover. I want to discover something that I feel like I don't know, or maybe or something.
Yeah, of course. And if you looked at, the poster or the artwork for something like, two lottery tickets or even a month in Thailand, it's white people,
Mm-hmm.
it's white guys on it. So even though they're Greek, they still, pass as Anglo. So you tell me, I don't know. That's just my observation.
We've seen the birth of Dekanalog doing using brownface on their marketing campaigns.
Never.
No, I'm just kidding. No, that's a really interesting observation, though. I never thought about it, but I'm just checking what you're saying against my own internal.
Well, we all have prejudices, right?
Prejudice.
We just do when we're watching those sort of things. Like it's like we just have those sort of natural prejudice, and it's something that you're either conscious of or you're not, I guess.
Yeah, I think there to me there's two things. I do agree that if I have a choice between seeing a filmmaker from Hungary or a filmmaker from Korea, like I'm more likely to watch the Korean film.
Same, same. I just am. I just
Yeah. I think it's partially tied into that element of discovery you're talking about. But I also, this is something where I'm constantly scratching my head on, because the more I see from Romania and Hungary and even Ukraine and, Belarus with some of the stuff that Deaf Crocodile's putting out, like
mm,
there are some amazing filmmakers that have been working in all these countries for years. And I think, um, they're just not spoken about as much.
no, they're not.
Yeah,
They're not, and they should be. But it's like it's such a I don't know. It's the good and bad thing about having so much accessibility to things now. It's like, who's writing that canon? You are with doing a podcast. It's like that's like the canon now is there's a lot of nooks and crannies to fill in, and that canon now is kind of blown wide open,
huh.
really, for better or worse.
Eh, Anytime a body of knowledge is blown wide open in the context of exposing more, it's always a good thing in my mind.
100%. You're 100%. I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah, no, I think that's really interesting. I'm gonna I'm gonna be processing that statement for a while because I think that there's a lot of truth in what you're saying, even just checking my own reaction to it.
Hmm.
I don't know why I have an interest in seeing Mami Wata. Let's just take that for example. When I
Yeah.
saw that, my interest level was 6 times higher than some of the other titles. Why? I don't know. Right? I've never really asked why.
Well, I think, we all want to see ourselves in something very different than who
Okay.
we are. That's, I
Okay.
think, really that to me is why we engage in art or watch these types of films, or we're always looking for a version of ourselves in something else. And if it's too close to who we are, I want to go further. I want to just go a little
Right.
bit more to the left.
Right.
I think there is, um, you get a lot of like Deaf Crocodile is a great example. It's like I would never have watched or seen half of the three-quarters of those movies that they put out. And it's
Uh-huh.
amazing. It's like I hope the sales are there for them because what they're doing is God's work. So
Yeah, yeah. And there's a really compelling argument they made about putting out Russian films on their podcast. where they were like, look, we get it. They're controversial right now. Like the
Yeah.
government of Russia is a controversial thing right now. Like, but some of the filmmakers there have produced some amazing work, and like we're gonna put it out.
I mean, American films have always been controversial, and no one's complaining about that. So,
Yeah.
well, I'm sure some people are,
Love
but yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think it's, I don't want anybody telling me what I should and shouldn't see. And I think having all
Yes.
this accessibility, and even, even if they're, and when I say that, I don't mean, taking something away. I mean, not giving you the opportunity by not distributing it, someone not putting it out there. That's something else entirely different.
Yeah. I mean, I think, I think we're just kind of violently agreeing with each other here, but I think it's there's when I think about I get a lot of questions about why I've watched more than five rape revenge movies,
Right.
right? And it's like, look, I'm not celebrating the rape part,
Yeah.
um, but I do celebrate the fact that these movies are out there now for people to watch because you reach a point in your cinematic journey where you're interested in seeing thrill or a cruel picture. You just kind of
Right.
you just get there at some point. And not
Yep.
everybody does, but there's a large enough body of people that do that that film should be preserved. And like, not because it's good or bad or the acting is good or bad or none of that. Just simply because because it's there and there's a base level of interest in it. So you make it
Yeah.
accessible and then let people decide, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's like I saw a cruel picture once. I don't know if I need to see it again, but I was glad I got that opportunity to see it the first time. It widened my canon, and I think that's really
Totally.
what we're always looking to do. It's like how far can I be pushed?
Well, I think philosophically we're aligned. There's not really a natural transition I can think to get back to the films you've released on Dekanalog for OCN, but I'd like to go back there for a second because um, what are the ones that are, just one or two or whatever comes to mind when I ask the question, I guess. What are some ones other than Adam Rifkin? I think that was a great example that you hope people get to discover. I'm reticent to say you hope sell better because again, commercially it is what it is. I mean, you are a
Yeah.
business, but what are some ones that you're really hoping that people get a chance to see that maybe aren't doing as well as you wanted?
Well, I mean, they're all, and when I say they're not doing as well as they all have. Rifkin's different where it's only home video. That's the only way you're going to see it. You're not going to see this on Canopy. You're not going to see it on Prime. You're not like this is the only way you're ever going to see this is home video. So that's to separate that from a two lottery tickets or a month in Thailand. Those are up on Canopy. They're up on everything that you can. You can rent these things other ways. Um, but I think I I know it sounds like a cop out, but I hope people see all of them because they're all good. But I think one that I really, I mean, I like documentaries, obviously, but one movie that I was really pleased with, and George has a history with this movie that is much longer than I could possibly explain, but Seppa, Our Lord of Miracles, is a really fantastic documentary. And you talk about, we were talking earlier about you know what it takes to just make a good story, and it's like um, an open air prison colony in South America. Just let the cameras roll, talk to the inmates, and see what happens. I mean, it's humorous, it's shocking,
Mm.
it's ultimately you just kind of throw your hands up in the air. It seems everything seems kind of futile. For me, I just felt a range of emotions watching that movie. And I think it's a very special documentary that the whole story is George will correct me if I'm wrong, but he's not here to talk about it. But he actually stayed in an Airbnb in South America where Walter Saxer, who made the movie, ran. And they're just talking about, oh, I do film distribution. Walter's like, oh, I made a movie. And it's like, well, what is it? He explained it to me. He's like, well, where is it? It's like, in my closet.
No way.
So through the help of Walter's daughter, Michaela, George actually helped get that film restored.
Wow.
That would have never happened had he not gone to his hotel in South America. Walter Saxer was a prolific producer, did
Sure.
Most notably his work with
Artists,
Bernard
yeah.
Dog,
Yeah.
doing Geraldo and Aguirre, the Wrath of God. And I think the story is that I feel like the hotel was called Hotel Fitzcarraldo or something like that.
Oh,
So
wow. Okay.
you can stay at Walter's place. Um, Basically, is what I'm trying to tell people who are listening to this. If you look it up in South America, you can stay at Walter Sachs. I'm sure he'll regale you with Klaus Kinski stories. So
It's worth the price of admission.
yeah. Well,
Yeah.
what's funny, so I think Walter is in either Burden of Dreams
Okay.
or My Best Fiend. Like I feel like he's just there's a scene where Klaus is just like ripping him apart, and Walter just will not back down. It's pretty impressive to watch. I mean, it might even be online somewhere, but it's oh man, he survived the Amazon jungle and Klaus Kinski. So
You, anybody that knows some of the stories of Klaus Kinski would run to the Amazon jungle, I think.
no kidding, I would probably live there for the rest of my life too. But he's
Uh,
not going back there.
this is one of the things that I think is another reason I love Dekanalog, because if you there is this thing that happens in, I guess, once you start going down rabbit holes of film history and stuff, where you start to pull at different threads, and this is such a great example. The story you just told, for people that like Werner Herzog, they're going to have a natural interest in Seppa Our Lord of Miracles,
Yeah,
simply because they, whether or not they know it, they've been around that world already, and so
exactly.
right, you just pull on that thread a little bit, and then you've got a producer who's done other work, and turns out he's made a movie too. Like,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I love that discovery process.
yeah. And I think too, you talk about history, and I think anyone who is a lover of film is also, or they should be a lover of film history. And
Sure.
so much of what we're talking about too, when you talk about contemporary films, they're just not history yet. And I think if there's anything that I'm sort of trying to be consciously aware of with our titles, is like this is something that I wish was in my hands in 20 years. You know, I think
I
that's
love
part of the thing that I think about when I'm putting out these discs on home video. It's like somebody somewhere, whether it's on a physical disc or a torrent, whatever, someone's going to stumble upon this. And for me, I'm 44, 45. Anyway, I'm one of those. I can't remember. But I think,
depends on the day, I guess.
yeah, it depends on the day. Um, for me, I content and media is really taken for granted, I think, in the 21st century. And if it's just a file, it's not that important. But if it's actually something you hold in your hand
Yeah,
or that you paid money to see, there's an investment in there,
yeah.
and it's different. And I think everything that I think that we're putting out is an investment, and it's worth your time. Maybe not now, maybe not next year, maybe when there's a sale. I don't know, but it's like there's actually value in it, and I mean, there's value in everything we put out, but the home video stuff specifically, I try to make as special as possible.
There, I've said this before, but I haven't said it in a while. People willingly give to art museums, like paintings and sculptures, and people will willingly give to the opera. People willingly give to art. I mean, people have always given to art to preserve art, right? And I think we're kind of in this phase right now when you think about 1,000 copies coming out of something, or 2,000 copies coming out of something, that we're in this sort of phase where if there's something you're willing to take a chance on, you can kind of think of yourself as a patron, or you can kind of think of yourself as helping preserve, because yes, it is commercial, but nobody's becoming Bezos off this industry, right? Like this
No,
is, yeah, like
exactly. Yeah,
there's a give and a take. Like if you want to see more stuff like SEPA, you got to buy it, and someone's got to buy it, right?
yeah, and the flip side to that too is if you live in a community like Los Angeles, and you didn't like it, you could take it to Amoeba, you could trade it in, get some
Right.
cash, let someone else take that blind buy
Sure.
on what you blind bought, and if it just if our titles just keep coming in and out of Amoeba, I'm okay with that.
Yeah. There's a list that I use. I try to write a short, 3, 4 paragraphs on everything I see, just to kind of get in the habit of writing. And so I end up writing a couple hundred reviews a year on
Wow.
stuff. And as part of it, I follow this list called They Shoot Pictures. Are you familiar with this list?
They shoot pictures? No.
Yeah. So you know that old movie They Shoot Horses, don't
Yeah.
they? So it's a riff on that. It's called They Shoot
Yeah.
Pictures, don't they?
Okay.
And it's somebody in Australia who has found 13,000 unique critics' top 10 lists and amalgamated them into one common list of the best movies of all time. Now, of course, there's no, so everybody that, if it makes a critics' top 10 list, it gets a point. And
Okay.
just adds up points, right?
Okay. Okay.
Um, and he's got some formula that works, and he's been doing it for a number of years now. So, but there's 23 or 24,000 movies on that somebody has put on their top 10 list that's considered a critic. Um,
Wow.
yeah, and so I use that as a base for like where this movie is in the sort of psyche of film critique, right?
Of the moment.
At any given moment. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or any given year, I guess, right?
Yeah.
And the interesting thing that I love about this is because that's an attempt at an objective measure, right? Although, of course, there's nothing objective about what we're doing, but like this is an attempt at creating some guide of objectivity around good movies. Then you get to see how physical media impacts this list.
Hmm.
Because
Interesting.
as stuff comes out, 2 years later, it's shooting up into the top 10,000 and then maybe in the top 5,000 because people
Yeah.
are just seeing it,
Because they can see it. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And before they weren't.
Right. Right. No, it's, I mean, just look at the BFI list with Chantal Ackerman, just like skyrocketing #1. I think it's that accessibility and who they're, the BFI is widening their net of people to talk to.
Yep.
Yeah, of course it's going to shoot up there.
Yeah.
It surprised everybody, myself included. But yeah, of course. I mean, it influences the canon 100%, and that's really what we're talking about. And if I don't know if all of our titles are going to influence the canon in any kind of way, but I sure hope so.
Again, you're giving people a chance, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and that's what I like. I mean, there's speaking of new up and coming directors, and if I'm incorrect in this, my apologies, but there's a director who you've released two of their films, I think, on a street. Let's see, Streetwise, and then Streetwise release had two movies on it, right? Or was it just the one?
No,
No.
it was just the one.
Okay, Streetwise. So there's uh, a new filmmaker called Jiazhou Na.
Yep.
And this is one of those ones where I think the release date was 2021 of the
Yeah.
movie. And this movie is, um, I mean, great. And like, it's excellent.
Yeah, I know.
And it would have never been seen. I mean, like, what are the odds this would have ever been seen outside of its home country if
I,
not for this release?
I don't know. I probably wouldn't have been. It was. I think it came out in 21 or 22. We had it. It's funny. We opened it in New York, sold out screenings at Metrograph against Barbie and Oppenheimer,
Nice.
and it sold out. It did really well. It came back, and yeah, it's just one of those things where you just had to take a chance on it. And I think too, and I will give myself and Tony Stella credit, where I think with some of those titles, you just got to find the right artwork.
Yeah.
And Tony's work is incredible. I mean, he's
Yes.
absolutely one of my favorite artists. And he doesn't really, you talk about you not liking contemporary movies. He doesn't like contemporary movies necessarily. But it's like watch the movie. There's some really great stuff in there, and I think you'll like it. He did. I think he made a great artwork. But what I'm saying is, I think that artwork was a great gateway for a lot of people who just wouldn't have normally seen that, because some of those titles, um, you can't use a screen grab. You can't use photos. It needs artwork for the idea to come across. And I think another example of that is Time of Molting, which has the crude drawings that were actually made by the director Sabrina, that were supposed to be the child's drawings in the movie. And it's like, I think I think that's the other thing too, where when you're doing these things, it's about the artwork. You have to think about what that slipcover is going to be. Um, and I consistently lean towards whenever possible to get something illustrated.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you look at Streetwise and the brain just goes to this is a new Fukasaku movie or something because it just fits in line with the way a lot of that artwork has been in the last 5 years. And
Yeah,
so there's a natural sort of, it's just like, oh yeah, I got to see this. What is this? This is interesting, right? Without even
yeah,
reading anything about it.
yeah. It's like blind buy. It's like whether it's 1970 or 2021. I don't think anybody was disappointed in the movie. I mean, it's like everyone I've talked to, all the comments that you read, the user comments on the Vinegar Syndrome website. It's like it's
Yeah.
all very positive. It's like the artwork doesn't lie.
Yeah,
It's
yeah, yeah.
just, it's
Oh,
just it's illustrative and it's evocative of something that is not of the now. And I think that's something that even though it's a contemporary film, it's shot on, red camera, Alexa, whatever it's shot on, there's still something evocative about that movie that is not of the time,
yeah.
even though it is in the 21st century. And that's really, I think, something very powerful about the film. I think it's a wonderful film. I love Streetwise. Absolutely love it.
Yeah. Well, Elijah, this is a fantastic introduction to Dekanalog. I think it's a great introduction to you as a thinker and kind of as a human and somebody who cares deeply about the work you're putting out. Um, uh, are you? What have I not asked about or not brought up so far? Is there anything that you wanted to make sure we covered?
I don't know. I really don't. It's like I'm so, kind of removed from the catalog. It's like people ask me about the catalog. It's like I don't know what it is. It's like I know what I do, but I don't know about its perception. I think its perception is positive. I want to put out stuff that I want, and I feel like I'm not an outlier in terms of physical media collectors. I think there's stuff that if it's something I want, that's what I put out. You know, um, we do also do Rifkin thing being an example. We try to put out English language films as well if we like them. A great title that a movie that I love, I Blame Society, which I just think is hilarious. But I also, love the director. She's one of my best friends, and I just think like this movie needs more love. And I really think that you talk about, you know, it's not history yet, but it will be. It's like I think I Blame Society is one of those movies. I just think it's so funny. It's so of its time and ahead of its time in the same moment. I just think that movie is hilarious, and it's so Jillian to me. I mean, I just like it just cracks me up. I think that's a really great one. Um, we do dabble in some repertory stuff like SEPA, and we put out Heart is Deceitful Above All Things, a movie talk about a movie that is polarizing. It's like there's a lot of baggage around that movie, and I don't think it impacts the movie itself. I think it's a great movie. It's not always easy to watch, but I think art should be that way sometimes.
Yeah, anytime Asia Argento is brought up, you immediately get into some of the crazy part of her personal life, which is not fair to her. I mean,
No, it's not. It isn't fair. And just, that movie is so multi-layered with drama. And you just think about JD and what happened with her and her story being exposed, and so there's a lot to it. But I think it's funny. I hadn't seen the movie since it came out the first time. I think Palm Pictures put it out on DVD. That was the first time I saw it, and I was surprised at how much I liked it. I was really surprised at how much better it was than I remembered. So I was happy that we got that out again.
yeah. There's probably another 30 minutes of conversation here that I won't get into today. But you know, you, you're The Palm is a good one. Image was one. Uh,
Hmm.
there was a few of these DVD labels back when. My favorite reminiscing about the DVD days. One of the interviews I had, they called it the salad days of DVD. That's a phrase I had never heard before. I never heard since. But I guess there was a time when they were selling well. So all these Palm Pictures was a great one. I had many films from them.
Oh yeah, I had all their director's series sets.
Yeah.
But those were, I mean, I think those were some of their best discs. And I think they even put out, did they put out Six String Samurai originally? I think they did. Was it
Oh, good
Palm?
good callback.
Or
I'm not sure. I'm
I
not
can't
sure.
remember anyway, but I just remember this is funny. I even told Vinegar Syndrome this, but I was like, I remember working. It's like I was at home. I had a standing desk, and I just remember thought out loud to myself, Six String Samurai isn't out on Blu-ray yet, and it should happen, and Vinegar Syndrome should put it out.
Uh-huh.
I just thought, and then to go about my day, and then 4 or 5 years later, whatever it was, it bypassed Blu-ray and went straight to 4K,
Yeah.
and working on that was just so much fun. I mean, Lance is a really special guy, the director, and um, that was it was such a challenging piece to make because we were making the bonus features during COVID, and
Oh,
I'm pretty proud of what we put together for that making of doc. Um, Not to digress from Dekanalog, but I was really proud about that one. And yeah, um, yeah, Palm Pictures. It's like funny. It's like Image, Palm, Anchor Bay, even Synapse, and
Sony
Blue
Pictures
Underground.
Classics had some good ones.
Yeah, of course. And I think there is a whole story there, which could be talked about at length. And I know some information, but like it was just a um, completely different method of operation than
Mm.
what it is now. It's like you could. I'm having deja vu. I think I just was just telling somebody the same story earlier,
Okay.
but I feel like there was that the way that these DVDs were coming out was really based on publishing, right? And things used to come out on New Release Tuesday because
Yeah,
that was
that's right.
slow. That was the slowest like sales day. That was the only reason why that happened.
Mm.
And so it was books first, and then I think records and CDs and DVDs and
Huh?
VHS, all that kind of stuff. So like, but now all those distribution companies are gone.
Yeah.
That model is done. That's the
Yeah.
thing. And I think that's when I did the Spider Baby thing, that disc was done for a year before it came out. Now I'm putting out stuff. I'm delivering things that are coming out in November. So it's like it's just totally different. It's completely different, for better or worse. That's just what it is. And yeah, that was it was okay to take a chance on buying something, and I, even the prices to me, they haven't changed that much to me. It's like $20 Blu-ray was a $20 DVD. It was a $20 Anchor Bay 2 disc set when I bought it. It
Sure.
hasn't changed. So you can't blame the economy, because I feel like it's the physical media is basically the same cost it was to me 20 years ago.
Yeah, you've got. I remember scrolling through the digital bits every Tuesday and just seeing
Totally.
the Monday before, seeing what I was going to get the next day.
Yep.
Um, well, yeah, Y- th- it's interesting you talk about the distribution model changing. That I'm kind of stuck on that idea for a second because I think in a way, Vinegar Syndrome has kind of taken the place of a lot of that in a
They
really,
have.
in a way that just really captivates me.
Yeah, they have. I mean, you know, it's such an onslaught of titles that come out on a weekly basis, and it never used to be that way. You had a few titles here and there, and they would pop up in stores. And if it wasn't in one Suncoast, you went to the other mall where the other
Yeah,
Suncoast was. You would
man.
find it. It's like you had to like things were precious, I guess, is what I'm saying, and maybe things don't seem quite as precious, but that's in the moment. And I think in the end, I'm still trying to put out precious movies. By that, I mean things that are important.
I think that's the perfect way to end it. Elijah, uh, I feel very. I really like the way that you're open and just kind of approach this with a I don't know. I guess the humanity. It comes through as you're telling these stories. So thanks for being honest and making this a great interview.
My pleasure, anytime.
Thank you for listening. To hear more shows from the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network, please select the link in the description.
Hello, my name is Kevin Tudor, and I'm one of the 3 hosts of Almost Major, a film podcast dissecting many major indie studios and the films they release. Every week, myself, Charlie Nash, and Bryden Doyle discuss overlooked, forgotten, or bona fide classic indie films via studio-specific miniseries. We've previously covered numerous films from Artisan Entertainment, Lionsgate Films, and New Line Cinema. Titles including The Blair Witch Project, American Psycho, Dogville, But I'm a Cheerleader, Saw, Requiem for a Dream, and Ringmaster, you know, the Jerry Springer film. Anyways, we have a fun time every week and we hope you will join us. Subscribe to Almost Major wherever you get your podcasts. Now proudly a part of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.
If you're looking for more horror outside of the mainstream, look no further than Unsung Horrors, a podcast about underseen horror movies. I'm Lance.
And I'm Erica. Every other week, we'll cover a horror movie with fewer than 1,000 views on Letterboxd. We'll even give you double feature recommendations to pair with the movies we discuss.
From gothic to shot on video, from slashers to comedies, from giallo to J-horror, we'll cover all the subgenres. So join us as we unearth these hidden gems of horror.
Follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook, all at Unsung Horrors, available wherever you listen to podcasts. And part of the Someone's Favorite Productions podcast network.